Thank you, Samantha. And to be honest, now that I've seen what the kids have done, we don't really need to listen to my talk because that pretty much sums up everything. Although I'll try and deep dive a little bit more. How beautiful has the music been this morning as well? Especially Amazing Grace. If you're anything like me, that pretty much sums up my story. Look, thank you for having me. I'm not sure if that's needed. Most people are not me. A little bit more there or there. Okay, so thank you for having me. I wanted to also take this opportunity because it's rare that you come to a church or a faith-based community. Sometimes you come as a speaker just once and you can engage with people and everyone's on their potential best behaviour. But my family and I were blessed to come here in December. And so we have actually really enjoyed, I guess, the fruits of what you display. So some feedback for the church. Your hospitality and your humble, God-centered love is truly wonderful. So for us as visitors and outsiders to come here now, probably 10, 12 times, it's really great and rewarding to see, and maybe it is the sunshine up here, or the fact that you are connected to the one that gives the source of life. But from us to you, we tremendously are grateful and thank you for those that are both here today and those that maybe are away today, but we've had lunches at their places or we've spent time after church talking. Because that really is testament to really you being the hands and feet of Jesus. So it's been awesome. And so we're happy to obviously pass that on as soon as we could. Okay, so today the topic is how to be mind fit. Now, I've coined that term a little bit, but I've taken it off one of my so-called people that I'm influenced by. And I want to focus today on, I guess, building a little bit more awareness of what the children just went through. Because if we can have awareness about how actually things work, we can be a bit better at understanding about how the choices or the decisions we make in our life are either helpful or harmful, good or bad. Because whether we like it or not, our life is made up of choices and habits. And if they're more helpful and good, then that pretty much puts us on a much more positive path. So the influencers at the moment, if you like, you may have or may not have heard of this particular gentleman. He is a devout Christian and he is someone that recently has written a book called The Greatest Love Story Ever Told. Bear Grylls talks about how just like our physical health, we all need to look after our emotional health. And we're going to talk today about the link between our mind and our bodies, or our bodies and our minds, a bit of back and forth. And we're going to try and look at how we can implement practical ways to be more robust and resilient and resourceful. They're fancy words, but the reality is, if you look at athletes have a pre-season. And when they're in that season, they have to have their bodies, as well as their minds and emotions, able to withstand what happens or what is thrown at them. Many times they can't control what happens to them, but if they're best prepared, they can deal with those things. How much more should we be prepared or be mind fit for the game of life so we can be more robust and resilient and resourceful? Does that all make sense? The choice is yours, and hopefully when we finish today, you'll be more inspired to be more conscious, because as a disciple of Jesus, for those that are, that means that we have discipline. And because we are made beautifully and wonderfully, the more we can understand how we can look after ourselves, the better we'll be able to pass on what you have shown us as a church in the last 6 months, which is love, affection, and patience. So, the other influences, for those that want to delve into some reading or some courses, Dr. Darren Morton, which doesn't live too far from here, I've had a man crush on him for years. I was told not to mention that again when I present, but it's a new church, so I figured it's okay just once. And it's one of those things that when you meet people that you really admire, you're thinking, are they going to be as nice as you sort of see them on the programs that you watch, which is the Live More program a lot of the time. He's actually better. And then he also always pays for the smoothies or the beverages as well. So he's actually lovely, and a lot of what he talks about, he Live More Happy or his Live More program or the Lift project he does in the corporate world, I'll draw upon today. But I really encourage you as a church, if you haven't done that particular course or program, to look into it. Or if you're part of a corporation or you have a business that you run and you want to look at how best to look after the well-being of your employees, I strongly encourage you to look at the LIFT project, which is one that he sort of steers more towards the corporate world. I've had the pleasure of being an endorsed provider of that program and seeing the progression or seeing the journey that certain corporations go on when they first turn up and they're like this, to then being with their one-ups or being with their colleagues, high-fiving and hanging out is truly remarkable. So science is catching up on what God has already basically revealed to us in the Bible, but they do work. The other one is the stress recovery effect. For those that went to the Elia Wellness Summit this year, Dr. Nick Hall, probably the best presenter I've ever heard. He's currently riding about 3,000 miles. He's about 75, 76 to raise money for polio. And so he was a wonderful presenter, and his book with Dr. Dick Tibbetts, which looks after Forgive to Live. Has anyone ever done Forgive to Live or heard about that? They basically collaborated and wrote this particular book. And so some of the things I'll draw upon today are with that. And of course, you've seen Bear Grylls. Now, moving right along. We talk about athletes. We talk about trying to be more robust. But what I want to try and do, especially in this community, is always draw back to the best examples that we have. So we can get really focused on all of this, which is tremendous, but ultimately we have an even greater source of inspiration, and that is coming from obviously the Word, and then when the Word became flesh. So as soon as you are out of balance, He can devour you, injure you, and do everything to stop you. So if there's any motivation to really stop and start to look at the choices I'm making or we are making in our lives, have a think about the fact that we are always having an opposition. I said this to my mother recently. She turned 80. She would be the worst client I've ever had. And I said, Mum, do you realize that if you don't do anything, you don't stay where you are? Do you realize that? You don't progress, but you regress. And so if you're looking at things to be beneficial to you, even if you don't want to progress a lot, you at least must do things to maintain that balance in your life. Because as soon as you're out of balance, as soon as you start to regress, you will start to get injured, or you'll start to be more vulnerable. Or the impact you have on your close network maybe won't be as good or as positive as it could be. So don't get tired of doing good, or look at the things we're going to talk about today and think, I haven't done that in a while. Or I do that, I'm going to try and do a little bit more. Or think of people in your network where you think they might benefit from what we're going to cover today. Because we want to make sure that as we understand together is better, what we learn here we want to take out and pass on as best we can. They're great icebreakers as well, these type of topics. Okay, so today we want to go through, to be successfully mind fit, we must look at how best we are wired, building awareness and understanding things. It also gives us a little bit more of a why. Like, why does it matter? Well, because if you don't understand this, then you may be doing things that are more harmful and bad for you than you actually realize. And there's subtle changes you can make. So the world we live in, we're going to go through that quickly. The stress effects, what happens internally, and how we are wired, or our limbo is listening, Dr. Darren Morton calls it. Rest to feel your best or de-stress. Movement as medicine, and understanding the great outdoors. Again, Samantha talked about today how enjoyable it is to be in the sunshine. It's no fluke that you're probably in a little bit of a better mood than Samantha was with her classroom all week. And then we've got what we are, what we consume. We'll touch a little bit on nutrition and hydration. Connection together is better, and gratitude. We'll finish with that one because, again, we want some key takeaways so that when we leave here, we can start to implement things that we know will be helpful to us and less harmful. So, the best case study I could find, there's a lot of research out there, but the best one that I could find in my limited time on this earth was a person who was brought up in the Middle East by the name of J. Christ. Now, he was mind fit because he walked a lot, by all reports on water. He had positive connections with people and God. Gratitude. He gave thanks regularly. He rested. And his response to stresses, which we'll go through a little bit soon, was to spend some alone time being mindful, not mindful. He sought guidance or solace from the experts, and what he consumed was good for him whether it was the food or what he read or what he listened to. If you look at one of the examples, I don't know about you, but you can put your hand up if you're one that gets hangry. Myself, and hereditary-wise, makes up for about a third of who you are. The other third is a little bit more about your circumstances. The rest you have control over. But my poor son has at least got my hangry genes. And so I don't know how I would have went after 40 days and 40 nights. And so again, when you're out of balance, that's when your opposition comes in and gets you. One of the worst injuries I ever had was when I wasn't focused, the ball went out, and I just started to look at what my next thing was until I got swept off and I was gone for 6 months. Out of balance, lost my focus. So with what we learned today is to try and keep us strong and robust and resilient. We are what we consume. We're not just talking about nutrition and hydration. Where you spend your time, you will become. Your diet is what goes in here. And then that will affect what we'll cover in a sec called our limbic system. So again, the choice is yours. Your life is filled with habits. More good, hopefully, than bad. But there is hope. Because like I just said before, and Dr. Darren Morton talks about this in his first session of the Live More project, is you are a third to maybe a half based on your hereditary and your circumstances. But your circumstances can change. But a third or a little bit more is based on your decisions, which is awesome. Which means that these things are designed to empower you, which means you still have control. And then we're going to cover also what we call brain plasticity, how you can actually rewire the way that you think. So, myself, very pessimistic, very negative. Not now. I grew up in an environment where it was always not solution-based, but pointing out the obvious. So over time, I look back at my life and I go, how did that change? Oh, I know, because I was plugged into the source of life, because my connections were based on focusing on what was most important, vertical, not horizontal. But when I went back into my old environments, or where I was brought up, they hadn't changed or moved. Doesn't make them evil or bad, but I can see the effects of being plugged in where I should be or living there. And so it's really important that we understand the effects that we're having on ourselves, but we have a lot of control over that, which is awesome. So wherever you are today on your journey in life, understand that you still have so much that you can choose that's going to be good for you and good for those around you. Stress is called the health epidemic of the 21st century. I'm not going to go into the terrible stats of men's health, which is very dear to me, and other things that are happening in teens, but it's very important to understand that stress has been around since the Bible time. Otherwise, we wouldn't have seen so much talk about it. But the reality is that the rest of the world is realizing that even if you don't have a problem with having enough food or having enough clothing, this is actually the worst thing coming at you in the Western world especially. Dr. Nick Hall and Dr. Dick Tibbetts describe the stress as tension between two things. A stressor is a stimulus that causes the tension and pressure. Now, don't get me wrong, some stress can be good. Has anyone played in a grand final before? Anyone had a wedding day? That could be bad stress. First date. So you have adrenaline, you have good things. If anyone loves to jump out of planes, unless you're pushed, that can be, again, something that's a good stress. Your body performs in a certain way to prepare you for that particular stimulus. But sadly, a lot of the stresses that we have are bad stress. And we're going to go through what actually happens in our body. If we learn to release the valves and turn down the heat, as Dr. Darren Morton says, and focus on our response, then we can learn to manage and, in fact, thrive. And that comes down to how much we still have under our control. For it is not the stressor that determines the good, bad, or ugly, rather how you respond to that stressor that will make all the difference. And that's what we want to talk about today, how we're going to be empowered to deal with the stresses of life. One great example is being in the moment. Numerous studies show that when we are in this state of being mindful, not mindful, as we mentioned before, we de-stress. So what actually happens is our blood pressure will lower. Our heart rate can lower. And cortisol, which is our stress hormone, can actually decrease. So could you imagine being in the state that's the opposite? It becomes chronic. Blood pressure's up. cortisol gets released and stays. So all of that heightened sense, we actually leave the on switch always on. And so then we try and function in our life. We try and have relationships. We try and thrive in our workplace. We try and thrive in our faith community. So we need to try and turn down the heat or release the valves. And we'll go through how to do that soon. One of the greatest quotes is, "Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself." Clearly, they knew what we were going to go through. So whatever we learn and teach our kids here, whatever science wants to teach us is wonderful. But always we must revert back to what's most important. And that is that when we understand that we are made with purpose, and we are made with reason, and we are wonderfully made, we'll always have hope. I listened to an interview with, does anyone like golf here? Yeah? So the world's #1 golfer. I'm a little bit into golf, but not that great. Now, he's not a physical specimen like, say, a Michael Jordan, but he had an interview only about a month ago, and he said, "I really don't know what's the point. You know, I get it, you've got to be disciplined, and I win everything, but once you do win everything and you're #1, like, what is life all about?" And so we can still make sure that although we're physically in great condition, we have to understand where our trust comes from. We have to always be plugged into the source of life. And do not worry, because he is in charge. And as Pastor Frank Tassoni used to tell me when I first used to do studies with him, I was a Baptist boy, and I said, "Why should I go to church on Sabbath? Talk to me, Frank." He said, "Well, you need to look a little bit more vertical than horizontal, Todd." And I said, "Just show me in the Bible where it is." He said, "Okay, Mary prepared on the Friday for the Sabbath." And I went, "Okay, I guess I'm going to church on Sabbath." And so that journey or that comment that he made was so important, because my world was very horizontal, like most of us. My identity was not in Christ. My identity was in my abilities or my so-called achievements. And then similar, although I was never near to being #1, like the world's #1 golfer, you get to a point, you see the wizard behind the curtain, you say, "What's it all about?" That's why we need to be plugged into the source of life. And always think vertical, not horizontal. So, what is stress? How does it affect our body? Our metabolism slows down. Our blood pressure goes up, our heart rate goes up, cortisol is released for fight, flight, or freeze. Does anyone like snakes? No? No one ever does. So one positive thing about moving here in December is the amount of snakes we've had. One snake, after my son and I did a bit of exercise, was to decide to join us in our car. And so as I opened the car door, it decided it's probably a good place to be where my feet would be. And so at that moment, I didn't fight it. I probably should have fled, but I actually froze. At that point, I wasn't thinking about eating. I couldn't think about anything else, and my heightened senses were to deal with that stress. Thankfully, the snake catcher, who had a sticker, "I love snakes," I don't know why, once he took the snake, then my cortisol levels came down, my blood pressure came down, we burnt the car, and we will never go to that same park again. But it's important to understand that my switch turned off. But stresses aren't like the snake in the car. Some people have snakes all the time. So, unless you de-stress, you'll be under distress. Being in the on position leads to chronic illness, commonly known as the stress disease link, and this is the result. If you do de-stress and thrive, or Dr. Nedley's depression recovery course, they'll go through a lot of this in detail. And it's amazing to understand how our body is intertwined and intrinsically made. And so if we can understand it even more, why not? There's a lot of other things we consume. Maybe we can consume things that help us or be more beneficial for us. So high blood pressure, diabetes, depression, anxiety, insomnia, slow wound healing is an interesting one, headaches, and many more. They've done studies that when people are in hospitals and they have views of the sunlight outside or they're not underground, they actually heal and are a lot more happier. So it's important to understand where our environments are on a regular basis, because it does affect us in a positive way. And then we're going to find out why. So, how we are wired. In the Live More program, our brains have the limbic system. Has anyone ever heard of that? He calls it the limbo. So, we have our frontal cortex, our leader brain. That's designed basically for making decisions, what we focus on, language and speech. But it's wired to our limbic system, which is responsible for emotions. That's why it's called the emotional brain. Motivation, memory, and many bodily functions. That's why healing, more that's affected in a positive way, we heal quicker. So if we were to stop right here and understand that, you could spend a little bit of time now thinking, well, what actually goes through here, both in what I see and what this is focusing on? Because if what you're focusing on is harmful and negative for you, then it directly affects your emotions. It can't work any other way. But if we know that, then let's start to feed this with a lot of the positives. And that's what we're going to go through. So our limbo is listening. Even speaking to yourself in a negative way will put you in a downcast way. My environment, pessimistic, negative, but in the defense of the people that raised me, that was their environment for generations. And so to be fair, I can't judge them for that, but I still have an opportunity to respond. And that is, do I still want to be in that environment, or do I want to take in some different things? We called it visualization when we were athletes. We also had psychologists that went through preparing for certain environments, so we weren't distracted by the crowds and the stadiums and the travel, but on what we needed to do. And it does work. So if you are one that starts to speak more negative than positive, it's general 5 to 1. So 5 positives to get rid of the 1 negative that you may have said to yourself or to someone else. That's what the research tells us. So let's just start at least today being a little bit more positive towards ourselves, because then obviously that will filter out to the connections that we'll see later. Now, when we talked about brain plasticity, we'll talk about in a sec, feelings follow your focus. And what that means is that it works both ways. So as this starts to get more of a lift, it'll then start to talk to our leader brain in a positive way. So our decisions will then shift. And that's a good thing. So the connection, Dr. Darren Morton calls it, is our limbo lifts, if you like, or our neural pathways can change. And so if from today you start to speak more positive, you start to consume things that are more positive for you, you will start to rewire the way you think. It's incredible. Because why? We're wonderfully made. We weren't made to be pessimistic and negative. But God knew what our stresses would be. And so in the game of life, He's prepared us, or allows us to be best prepared to deal with what the other one wants to throw at us. So we're not out of balance. Okay, being in the moment. So this is one thing you can start to do to de-stress. Being in the moment, studies say, is when you are in the zone or when you're focused on something. You can't focus on what else? Negative, distractions, outside influences. And so the first thing you can start to do after speaking positive to yourself is try and find times or try and find things that allow you to really focus. It might be something so simple like building something, painting. That would stress me out, so I'm not going to paint because I can't paint. It might be something where we talk about mindfulness now, we talk about the different things that affect us emotionally in the secular world, and they're designed to empty their minds. And it gets filled with whatever. This is the opposite. This is being mindful and intentional when you're in this moment. Why? Because it allows you to focus on the positive. It allows you to center yourself and be intentional on what you're thinking about. And so those who delight in the Lord and meditate on His law day and night, that person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither, whatever they do prospers. And so if we can start to change where we focus and meditate on day and night, regularly, what you consume, you will prosper and you will yield fruit, both in your network and in the one that maybe is coming. Okay, so begin being mind fit, start by being less mindful, change what you focus on, and do this by spending the time being intentional. Easy enough? Who here wants to do that? Yes. Who here wants to be more positive? Yeah. So it's not a feel-good thing. It will work. That's a choice. It's a habit that you can start to make today. Okay, rest. So where is rest here? Beautiful. I don't really need to go through too much, but this is basically the start. When I have to triage what I do with my clients, athlete turns up, he's had 4 hours sleep, and I'm about to do a hard strength session. It's not going to really work. Flogging a dead horse. And so if you look at sleep, practical, simple ways, that will set you up for success the following days. But let's look at some practical ways to get our rest. Fancy word, rest to de-stress, feel better. But what I want you to do is start to think how you're going to land the plane. So, if your environment at home where you try and rest and sleep is not great, then make it an environment that's inviting. If your lights are on and you have blue lights, if you've noticed with the iPhones now, they make it to orange and red late at night. If you're up doing things on social media or consuming those things, instead of perhaps something that's a little less stimuli, then you'll be more alert. Your circadian rhythms, your brain and everything else will be stimulated as opposed to doing the reverse. It's had enough information. Give it a chance to recharge. Athletes need to focus on their recovery days and their off-season as much as their season and their games. If an athlete comes to me and it's a Monday and they're at, 80%, and by Wednesday they're not back to 100%, and the game's coming up on the weekend, I can't expect them to be at their optimal. And rest and recovery is so important. So sleep, if you like, after being intentional and making sure you're a bit more positive for yourself, really is something you need to focus on. It's something that seems so mundane. But if our politicians started to sleep more and be a little bit more hydrated across the board globally, we'd be in a much better state. So start to sleep a little bit more. 8 hours, they say, is optimal. More if you're a child. Sorry, kids. Yeah, so kids you need up to about 10 to 12. So parents or us, try and be a little bit more practical when it comes to 2 hours or so after the sunlight goes down. Start to create a habitat and environment where everything starts to come down for all your senses, what you smell, what you see, what you listen to. It's really, really important. Okay, let's go on to number 2, movement is medicine. Again, I've stole that off someone. I think it was Dr. Geraldine from Elia. Dr. Darren Morton says motion creates emotion. Why is that? Okay, so every time your muscles contract or you move, you have millions of these, nerves and neurons that are basically underneath your skin called proprioceptors. And what they do is constantly send messages to your limbo. What's the limbo responsible for? Emotions, memory, motivation. But they're messages that are positive and it gives you a mood lift. So that's why movement does really create, if you like, or motion creates emotion. So let's do the opposite. I sit, I do nothing all day. I'm in a place where I'm just looking at things on screens that stimulate me, and I'm not getting any rest. All of those things put us in a position to probably struggle to actually then thrive and make decisions that are going to be good for us. And so when you start to look at these things, basic tips, start putting them all together. And like I said at the start, you might already be doing a lot of them. You might just have to maybe add some or maybe start to lift it a little bit in how often you're doing it. So they generally say if you can do 20, 30 minutes a day of low to moderate exercise. Rule is, got to be safe and effective, whatever that is. If you stay within those guidelines, you're okay. Low to moderate intensity is 3 to 4. So you should be able to talk like this. Does not talk this much. If it's vigorous, it's about a 6 or a 7. Okay, but again, make sure it's safe and effective. And when it comes to resistance training, without going too much into a tangent here, resistance training is super important, especially once you hit 40. See, by accident, through our teens and through our, say, university days or our apprentice days, we're already moving. We're catching the bus, we're walking around, we're going to hang out with our mates. And so we've not only not been on the land that much, we've only been an adult for maybe 5, 10 years or less, but we've also been quite accidentally active. But once you hit 40, you go to a thing called sarcopenia. So your muscles don't just shrink, you lose muscle fibers, which means the structure or the support, both in the small and the big muscles, obviously decrease. So if there's anything that you want to take away from being a little bit more for movement, it's start to do some type of resistance training. Something simple like sit to stand on a chair, safe and effective. Body weight or resistance band, 1 or 2 days a week, upper and lower body. Now we are fundamentally made awesome. So fundamentally, we're designed to push things. If you push something, make sure you pull something. We're also designed to rotate, in all different ways. We're designed to sit or squat, to lunge, locomotion, partial or full. Make sense? were designed to hinge. They're the 7 fundamental movements. So don't worry about exercise. Don't worry about thinking of exercises. Think, have I done my movements today? And if I do, say twice a week, with or without load, great. And then what happens is those limited muscles that you have are going to not only grow, but obviously support your structure even more. So we're getting better sleep. We're being a little bit more intentional on what we focus on. We're being more positive towards ourselves and therefore others. Our limbo is buzzing at the moment. And now we're starting to add in a little bit of movement, which we know will also give us a mood lift. And it releases all of these happy hormones that again stay with us, not just when we're exercising, but longer after. If it was a men's health talk, I'd talk a little bit about other things as well that come with the benefits of resistance training. So again, try and look to implement these things into your world. All right. Great outdoors, blue and green should often be seen. Again, you've already understood the benefits of being in a sunny day as opposed to it being cloudy and downcast. Why? Because again, what we see and what goes through our frontal cortex to our limbo gives it a lift. So if you can do something that is movement-based in the great outdoors, it does the following. It boosts your immune system, it reduces your blood pressure, your stress, and improves your mood. It increases your ability to focus, even with children with ADHD. It accelerates your recovery from surgery and increases your energy levels and improves your sleep. Just be mindful of doing any type of moderate to high intensity exercise late in the day, because that will also disrupt your sleep. Similarly, if you had beverages that were caffeine related or other substances, try and make sure they're a little bit earlier on in the day. If you're doing movement at nighttime, that's more stretching based, that's more holding positions, breathing exercises, bringing everything down. That'll put you in a better state as opposed to a stimuli. Make sense? Beautiful. So I guess we're going for a walk after lunch. Yes? All right, we are what we consume. I'm more focused, to be honest, on what goes through here, but we need to focus on also what goes through here. In our Western world, we love protein. Yeah? We love our protein shakes. When I grew up, it was it. I didn't even know how to spell fiber, let alone what fiber was. But fiber is so important because not only is it neglected, but it directly affects what happens with our gut health. Okay? And again, there's a great course on the gut microbiome that Elia Wellness or Elia Fitness do. And that's something, again, it's a little bit more science heavy, but it's really important to understand the effect that our gut actually has on our emotions. I think the percentage is about 98% of serotonin comes from actually our gut. And so fiber or whole foods, water of course is important. If you have a lot of fiber, you need that, is so important for, again, our health mentally and emotionally more than just physically. Okay? So if it's high salt, high sodium, for example, high cholesterol, all those type of things, high sugar, processed, all those things that probably the audience here at the moment know already. They're the things that aren't great, not just for our waistline, that's secondary. It's more about here, because again, that affects our decisions. So do things that are good for you, because then you'll make better decisions. Okay? All right, so connection. This is really cool, this one. Connection and gratitude, your last two. So connection, together is better. Although I am mindful that some relationships aren't great. So it is up to you to determine in your circle whether they're worth pursuing or whether they need watering. I'll leave that up with you. But isolation is again a trick to make us more vulnerable. So talking to a faith-based community, you're already connected in some way, but connection is super important. So although it may be a little bit uncomfortable sometimes, do your best to try and meet and talk and engage. You might surprise yourself. Normally, I have little things that I make people do, and they have to get up and find people that have like a little giraffe or something, and they have to talk about things. In this environment, you don't have to. But the understanding is, when it talks about even addictions, the greatest thing you can do is be connected. Connection is the one thing that actually beats addictions. And so in this faith-based community, in your family, in your vocation, think about, is there things or people that maybe are disconnected? And maybe there's some easy things you can do to provide that connection. Isolation is not good. I speak about my mother earlier, very isolated. Yeah? And you see the effect. Once thrived, went to church regularly, part of Bible groups, etc., different things, different ailments, and then suddenly in a year of being disconnected, you can see the change. So it's really important to maybe reach out to people, or for yourselves if you feel disconnected. I'm an introvert, by the way. Yeah, I'm not an extrovert. And so for me, I'm more happy with my own space. Ask my wife, I'd go to the movies on my own, read a book at a restaurant, no dramas, so then I can just argue with myself. But it's really important that you are connected. I'm blessed because I already had a faith-based community that got me out of that. But it's really important to think of those in your network that maybe need a bit of that as well, okay? So oxytocin is the last thing to talk about. Oxytocin is referred to as the love hormone. If you love pets and you pat your pet, you'll feel good. There's a reason for that, because oxytocin gets basically released. So, high fives, hugs, being part of it, etc. is important. For blokes, this is important because due to a different hormone that we have, it actually gets in the way of how much oxytocin we secrete. And so that's generally what also leads us to being a little bit wanting to be isolated. And so it's even more reason why we are connected more than even females. But I'll talk maybe more on that in a different topic. So to boost oxytocin, because you want some takeaways, spend time with loved ones, active listening, community involvement, exercise, and listening to music and enjoying nature. Okay? All of those different things. Certain type of music are better than others. But I'll let you explore that yourselves. Sounds good? All right, so we'll do high fives, hugs, or be connected over lunch. All right, gratitude. So we talked about our greatest case study. How regularly did Jesus go on his own to pray, especially before big decisions, before he chose his 12 disciples, before he went and obviously was crucified, how many times he had his alone time, or he actually gave thanks for what he had. And we are to give thanks in all circumstances, which can be hard, depending on the week that you've had. But gratitude is important for the reason we spoke about earlier about feelings follow your focus, because it's connected both ways. If I'm grateful for something, I have to focus on the negative or the positive. The positive, which means I've got no room for that stuff. So if you want to, either during the day or perhaps at the end of the day, before you actually go to sleep, or even get a gratitude diary, and you ask yourself the 3 questions. What went well today? And some days are going to be hard. Some days you're going to have to scratch your brain. I don't really know. And you probably won't want to some of the times. And if you feel that way, that's the time that you know you are doing the right thing. If you don't even want to take time to be grateful, if you don't even want to think about your day, you just want to go to bed, then it means that the state you're in, you probably actually do need to take some time. Make sense? The second question you can ask yourself is, what am I actually grateful for? What went well today? Didn't get pulled over by the police being on my phone. Okay, maybe you get a little bit better than that, Todd. What are you grateful for? And the last one is, what am I looking forward to? I think out of all of them, that's looking vertical, not horizontal. Because again, that shifts your mind and focus. I'm telling you, from a pessimistic, negative, needing amazing grace person in an environment where my identity was not Christ, to being able to understand these things and to stand up here in a Seventh-day Adventist church that I didn't even know existed is a true blessing. So let us all be an extension of what God does in our lives, because he wants us to thrive. If I'm strong, and you can't always be, that's why you need to be connected, then when I'm helping someone up, I've got a good foothold and I've got strength to do it. But the devil or our opposition would love us to be on the sidelines injured. Love you to be in the physio or the exercise physiologist room all the time. He can't play, which means he can't win, or he can't affect the team, or he can't affect the result. But it's not a season, sadly, like athletes. It's our whole life. From the moment you're born to the moment you pass, you'll have opposition and stresses. But the good thing is, we also have many choices, and we are empowered to be able to actually make more positive than negative, hopefully. So, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on toward the goal. Now, our next steps, making good choices. It may look different for everyone, but a healthier, stronger, more connected you are, the greater source bread, water, and light will mean you are more prepared for what comes or to help other people. Choose things that are more helpful and positive to help you be more mind fit. And then as Christians, let us not hold up mirrors, but instead open doors. And may we be strong enough to do that. Okay, when I take a seat now, if it's okay for the next few minutes, we're just going to play some things. So again, focusing on being a little bit more intentional and mindful, looking at things, blue and green, that are positive for our emotions, and hopefully from here, putting in some even little practical steps that will help you be more mind fit and therefore more robust, resourceful, and resilient for the game of life that we are in. Again, thank you for having myself and my family. You are a true testament to God's love for those here and those that we've met over the last 6 months. So I thank you, and I thank the pastoral team for having us here. Okay, for those who are able and willing, please join me in prayer for the benediction. Dear Lord and Heavenly Father, you are a great God, a great Heavenly Father. We thank you so much for the way that you have made us with purpose and with a reason. So we don't just survive, but we can thrive. We thank you for the wonderful work of Christians and believers around the world that have helped us understand even more about how you have made us. And I pray for everyone here, regardless of where they are in their stage of health or stage of life, whether they've known you for a long time or they don't know you. I pray and ask you to continue to reveal yourself to them. Know that they are made for purpose. And help us as we go about our days, our months, our years, grow stronger in our understanding of just how much you love us. That you will never leave us or forsake us. Help us to make good choices, make good habits, and help us to always be able to withstand the evil one that tries to get us out of balance. Draw us near to you, keep us safe. And I pray for this church and the leaders here, that you continue to guide them, continue to grant them wisdom and discernment. Thank you for this day. Thank you for the sunshine. And thank you for the many wonderful things you give us. In Jesus' name, amen.